Welcome to the TC Schedule app tutorial. In this video I'll show you how to use the TC Schedule app to complete a docket and have it approved by your site supervisor. Let's get started. Starting from the shift list, tap the Details button for a shift. On the first tab of the shift details at the bottom of the page, note that there's an Add Docket button. Not everyone will see this button. It's only visible if you're a team leader or if your office have set you to create the docket for this shift, or if your depot is set for all team members to create their own dockets. Let's go back to the shift list and look at a shift in the future. In this shift you may see the message, "Docket cannot be added before shift has started." But please note that this is configurable, so it may not be set for your employer. Let's go back to today's shift and let's add a docket. Your employer may have mandatory checklists, in which case you may see this message. We'll cover checklists in another video, so for now we'll just tap Continue to Docket. The docket has multiple tabs that we'll go through one at a time. On the first tab, there's some basic information and a place to add a comment. The comment is optional. The next tab shows the team members and allows entry of times. All the team members scheduled onto the shift are listed here. Note on this page that there are some required fields that are indicated by a red asterisk. The work type for each team member is set by the schedulers, but could be changed here if required. Let's look at entering times now. Tapping on a time field will open the phone's time controls. Here we see the controls on a Samsung Android phone. If you're using an iPhone, then the controls will look like this. But let's go back to the Android and continue entering the times. Let's enter 4 AM. Your employer may have a configuration that prevents a start time before the scheduled start, in which case you'll see this message. Let's correct that and continue. Let's add a finish time now. Note the invalid times message. In this case, the finish time is before the start time. I entered 3 AM when it should have been 3 PM. Let's correct that and continue. Next is break minutes. Here you enter the number of minutes of break time taken. If this team member did not take a break, then you must enter 0. You can't just leave this blank. There are buttons to quickly add 0 or 30 minutes, but you can also add any other number. If you've entered a value other than 0, then a break start control may appear. This is a configurable item that may be switched off for your employer. Let's enter a break start time. The app will validate that the break start is between the shift start and finish times. Here I entered 1:30 AM rather than 1:30 PM. Let's correct that and continue. We've finished the times for the first team member. If everyone on the team worked exactly the same hours, then you can tap the Copy Times Down button. Note that the other team members now have the same times. Now that you've seen the basic entry of times into the docket, let's look at some other features on this tab. In the instance where a team member is absent, you can tap the No-Show tick. This hides the times for that team member. The last team member on this shift is an external hire from a labour hire company. You can see that the name is editable, and you can see the hire company. In this case, the scheduler did not know the name, so let's fill it in now. The docket we're currently on is for a day shift. Let's look at a night shift now. Note that this shift has a scheduled start at 7 p.m. Let's add a docket to this shift. And let's go to the Employees tab. Note that the date for start is the shift date, but as this is a night shift, the date for finish is assumed to be the next day. Let's fill in the start and finish times. Note that the hours worked is showing 7 hours. But what if the shift finished early for some reason? Let's change the finish to 11 p.m. While that is valid as it's after the start time, it's not correct. Note that the hours worked is showing 28 hours. This is because the finish date is still the day after the shift date. But we can change this. Tapping the finish date will open the calendar control and we can select the correct date. Note that the hours worked is now 4 hours, which is correct. You might be wondering how to enter midnight. To do this, we need to enter 0 hours. Note that if we don't change the date, we get an error because we've just set 0 for the finish on the same day as a 7 p.m. start. So let's change the date to the next day. Note that the hours worked is showing 5 hours. The next tab is for vehicles. Here we can see a list of the vehicles on the shift. This selection for roof-mounted arrow board used will only show if the vehicle has a roof-mounted arrow board. This is also configurable and may not be switched on for your employer. Note that this is mandatory. You must select either yes or no. The next tab is for arrow boards, which could include arrow boards, VMS boards, traffic lights, or other equipment set up by your employer. Note that there's an Add to Aftercare button. If you're leaving the arrow board on site after the shift has finished, then tap this button. The next tab is for Aftercare. Note that the arrow board from the previous tab is shown here because we added it to Aftercare. We can set a pickup date for the arrow board, and we can also add other equipment to Aftercare. The items that appear on your list of equipment are defined by your employer. Note that there is a control for equipment taken from. This is filled in automatically if there's only one vehicle on the shift, but you'll need to select it if there are multiple. Let's also add a message frame. If you're replacing a missing or damaged item that had previously been on site, then tick this box. This allows the office to invoice the client and will calculate the correct number to be collected later. The last tab is for docket approval. When you've finished all the data entry and you're ready for the site supervisor to approve the docket, then tap this button. If you have not completed all the data entry, then you will see this error. Note it says that there are some invalid employee details. So we'll go back to the Employees tab and scroll to find the error. Let's add the break minutes and then copy the times down. Now let's go back to the Sign Off tab and tap the Ready to Approve button again. This time there are no warnings. Note that the page has switched over to Docket Approval. Also note that the data is now read-only. The supervisor can look through all the data that we have entered, but is not able to edit it. By the way, if you need to edit at this stage, you can go back to the Shift Details page and tap Edit Docket. But you will not be able to edit the docket once the supervisor has signed. The last tab is where the supervisor can approve the docket. The first thing to note here is that there is a switch for Supervisor Not Available. If we switch on Supervisor Not Available, then the other controls disappear and we can submit the docket ourselves. With Supervisor Not Available switched off, let's review the fields that can be filled in. The first field is for the name of the supervisor. There is a configuration option for this to display as first name and last name, but in this case we have only a single field. Let's enter the supervisor name. Next we have an optional field for additional email. The docket will be sent to an email address entered here. The docket is also sent to the client and to your office. Next is the customer satisfaction survey. This is configurable, so you may not see it on your app. The last data entry is a signature block. Let's sign this. If you make a mistake, then tap the delete icon and sign again. Finally, there is a button to save and approve, and a final confirmation of the docket approval. Now the docket remains in read-only mode and cannot be edited. The back-end system will now generate a PDF of the docket and email it to the relevant people. The data is also saved in the database for payroll and invoicing. That's all for this video on creating a docket in the TC Schedule app. If you don't already have TC Schedule, there's a link in the description to book a demonstration of the complete system. Thanks for watching.